We once truly loved each other, then got married, and then everything fell apart, painfully and humiliatingly. I spent a long time trying to figure out when exactly the love stopped being mutual, but it seemed Carter had made up his mind long before he even admitted anything. He was cheating on me, and frankly, the signs were too obvious to ignore any longer. He was disappearing more and more often in the evenings, suddenly staying late at work, going on endless business trips, while I remained in an empty house trying to convince myself it was just fatigue. Even though I was a successful lawyer myself, albeit earning less than him, Carter managed to look down on me, as if I were a loser, unworthy of his business and his level. One day, while he was away on yet another of his mythical trips, I decided to stop waiting for clarity and get to the bottom of it myself. I found a secret Facebook profile on his old laptop, carefully hidden, but not well enough for me to find it. And there, in black and white, photos, messages, confessions. His mistress, showy, well-groomed, just the way he thought I should be. He'd made barbed comments about my appearance more than once, but seeing who he was cheating on me with was like being punched in the chest. My insides clenched. Filled with anger, pain, and humiliation, I didn't wait for him to return. I called him and said harshly, bluntly, "Carter, are you cheating on me? I have proof." He responded so coldly, as if we hadn't been together for so many years. "Sophia, you've simply become uninteresting. You're busy with your meaningless affairs, you've neglected me, and besides, you're not some supermodel who can keep a man hooked on looks alone." I could hardly breathe from his insolence. "What are you talking about, Carter?" I breathed. "You knew perfectly well what my schedule was like when we got married. I didn't abandon you. You were the one who stopped coming home and talking to me." That's how I learned the truth. Without an admission, without an apology, without the slightest hint of shame. I thought he'd at least try to explain himself or show some remorse. But no. He twisted it to make it sound like I'd pushed him into the arms of another woman. And when I didn't accept his ridiculous accusations, he simply became even colder, as if he'd shut off all emotion. And then he finished, "It's great that you found out, Sophia. Now I won't have to hide my beautiful girlfriend. We'll have a perfect life once I divorce a worthless woman like you. I'll finally have a woman worthy of me and my name." Every word cut painfully. A shiver ran down my spine, from horror, from disgust, from the fact that this man had once been my husband. He proudly declared that he was going to marry his mistress, and at the same time humiliated me as if we hadn't been together for more than 10 years. Tears streamed down my cheeks, but he didn't even notice, or didn't want to. "How can you say that, Carter?" I whispered. "I've always been there, every moment, and I've kept all my promises." But he only smirked, as if he was tired of tolerating my existence. "It doesn't matter anymore, Sophia. You're simply not right for me. I'm a successful businessman, and I don't need a woman with average looks and a pompous law degree." I felt the ground slipping from under my feet, but I held on to the last shred of self-respect. "How can you say that? I'm a smart, capable woman. I tried to be a good wife to you, and now you want to ruin everything?" But even here, he found a way to hurt me even more. "I don't want to. I've already decided. It's over. I'll file for divorce. I've already found a lawyer. And Sophia, you better move out before I get back. I don't want to see your ugly face anymore." When he hung up, I sat motionless, as if turned to stone. A few hours later, his friend rang the doorbell, with the same cold divorce papers in his hands. He looked at me as if he pitied me, and that made the pain even worse. I silently took the papers, closed the door, and burst into tears, allowing myself to feel everything that had pent up for the first time. But amidst the despair, a spark appeared. I knew either I'd let him destroy me, or I'd rise up and become myself again, only stronger. And in that moment, I decided I wouldn't break, and I would definitely teach Carter a lesson he'd never forget. When Carter's friend handed me the paperwork, he casually mentioned that Carter was planning to drag out the divorce. At first, I didn't understand why he'd said that, But then it dawned on me. The prenuptial agreement. The very one he'd forced me to sign, assuring me it was a formality. The contract contained a clause. If he ever cheated on me, I would automatically receive half of his business. And only now, through all my pain and confusion, did I understand why he'd rushed to file the paperwork and why he wanted me to move out immediately. He was counting on me being too devastated to remember my rights. But I wasn't about to give him what was legally mine. So I immediately called his lawyer and scheduled a face-to-face meeting. Within 2 days, I packed my things, closed the door to our house, and moved in with my parents. The house was registered in my name, and it seemed like the only sliver of stability. I wrote Carter a short message. "I've removed my ugly face and body from your damn house." He replied as if he were doing me a favor. "It's good that you've come to your senses and aren't making a scene." He immediately boasted about his lawyer as if he were his magic wand. I calmly wrote, "I won't give you the business, and stay away from me." I was completely prepared for the process to be messy and lengthy, but only on his side, not mine. And then Carter sent another message. "I don't want to talk to you. Communicate only through my lawyers, and I hope you vacate my house." I almost laughed. His house? The man didn't even know who owned the property he'd been living in all this time. But with that laughter came a wave of rage. Hot, pure, the kind that burns the weakness out of you. He had no idea who he was dealing with. I doubted his lawyer Jake knew either. I arranged to meet him at a small cafe. When I walked in, Jake looked at me as if he'd seen a ghost, and the first thing he noticed was his hands shaking. He only calmed down when he realized who it was, and even then, not completely. He was a good lawyer, but clearly unprepared for his client to face someone of my stature. Carter had underestimated me his whole life, and now his lawyer found himself in the same trap. I smiled calmly, without unnecessary pathos. "Hello, Jake. Nice to see you." He looked at me with such surprise that I added, "In case you had any doubts, yes, I am the wife." "Ma'am, I'm terribly sorry. I really didn't expect you to come," he said quickly, as if trying to justify the very fact of the meeting. "The names don't match because I got married after I graduated. I used my maiden name for work," I explained, seeing him trying to figure out where he'd gone wrong. "Oh, so that's it," he muttered, awkwardly looking away. Trying to maintain a professional demeanor, he asked, "I assume you're trying to drag this out. That's what my client said." I leaned forward slightly, holding his gaze. "Your client lied to you, Jake. He's stalling. Isn't that what he was trying to pull on you?" Jake looked visibly nervous. I could see his hands trying to control the trembling. I was used to reading people. My job had taught me that, and I wasn't going to beat around the bush. "You don't have to answer," I said softly, but firmly. "I've known Carter for over 10 years. I married that idiot, after all. I know exactly what's going on in that thick head of his. And since I know you and don't think it's right to keep you completely in the dark, I'll explain exactly what's going on with this divorce." Jake blinked, as if he hadn't realized what he'd heard. "What do you mean, ma'am?" I looked straight at him, not looking away. "He told you he cheated on me?" His expression changed instantly. He'd given away everything he knew. And everything he didn't. He clearly hadn't expected me to drag the truth out so quickly. I won't pretend. Confessing to a colleague that my husband had cheated on me was painful, unpleasant, and humiliating. It's the kind of conversation you don't want to have with anyone, especially another lawyer. But I had no right to show weakness. Emotions would only confuse the situation, and I had to remain cool and collected, especially since I was the one with all the power in my hands. Jake, on the other hand, was completely clueless. He chose his words carefully and finally said, "Oh no, I don't think my client told me that, although he warned me you'd make baseless accusations, said you were just out to destroy him." I almost chuckled. It seemed Carter had managed to brainwash him well. "Poor Jake," I sighed. "Your client has you fooled. Although perhaps you'll be pleased to know that Carter considers you one of the best lawyers around." Jake blushed, fidgeted, and quietly added, "That's very flattering, ma'am. But you know, he didn't mention that his wife was a practicing lawyer. He only said that you worked at a law firm." "Carter never took my accomplishments seriously," I replied calmly. "He loved to belittle both my work and my contributions. I was foolish to put up with it for so long. But at least I was smarter when it came to signing the prenuptial agreement." Jake froze, as if hearing the word contract for the first time in his life. His face fell, his eyes widened slightly. It didn't take a genius to realize that Carter had deliberately withheld key information from him, and he clearly did so hoping that I would be too devastated to remember the documents. "In this marriage, is there a prenuptial agreement? Your husband didn't tell me anything. He didn't even hint." "Do you have proof, ma'am?" he asked, almost in a whisper. "Oh, Jake, I have plenty. I brought everything with me. I had a feeling Carter would try to shirk responsibility." Jake finally gave in. "I'd like to see the papers, and I need proof of his infidelity, if you have any." "Of course, don't worry, I have everything. And as I said, dragging out the divorce is the last thing I want. The sooner, the better." I took a folder from my bag and handed him all the materials. Contracts, correspondence, screenshots, photographs, exactly what Carter considered hidden. Jake took the documents, and I saw his shoulders slump. He read them carefully for several minutes, flipping through them, rereading them again, and his expression gradually turned to heavy hopelessness. Finally, he looked up. "Ma'am, you have irrefutable proof." I had no idea what was really going on. "I get it, Jake, and I know exactly what it's like to work with unreliable clients, especially when the other side has a lawyer who won't budge." He nodded, almost sheepishly. "You're right, ma'am. I think that's all for today. I need to have a serious conversation with my client before I decide whether to continue representing him. You'll likely be contacted soon, although I can't guarantee it will be me." I caught his hint, but ignored it. I thanked him for the meeting and left the cafe. Instead of going home, I headed straight to work, opened my laptop, and began preparing my own documents. The sadness that had been choking me all this time was gone. In its place stood rage, clear, cold, and incredibly useful. Now my only goal was to ensure that Carter got everything he deserved. And I knew he would have no escape. He'd trapped himself. The next day, Carter finally showed up. He called me personally, completely ignoring his own ban on direct contact. It was almost comical, painfully predictable. I knew he'd find himself in exactly this situation. When I picked up, Carter's voice was thick with rage, as if he was barely holding himself together. "What the hell did you say to my lawyer, Sophia?" I exhaled slowly, as if his tone hadn't bothered me in the least, and responded with feigned surprise. "Wow, look who remembered my number after telling me to stay away from him. And what happened to your lawyer, Mr. Carter?" He practically barked. "Enough of this comedy, Sophia. Tell me what you told him that he refused to handle my case today." "Refused today?" I seemed genuinely thoughtful. "What a shame, Carter. Maybe you should have been more honest before trying to drag someone into your war, especially considering who exactly he'd be facing." He breathed heavily into the phone like an enraged bull. "You have no idea what you're talking about. You're a nobody, and I won't let you take over my family business." "I'd love to see you try, Carter. I'll hire someone far more competent and crush you in court. You'll beg me to stop." "Excellent plan, really. Then please don't forget to tell your new lawyer about the affair and the prenuptial agreement," I said calmly, as if discussing the weather forecast. After these words, he simply ended the call. A click and silence. I even smiled. He'd gotten himself into such trouble that he had no idea how serious it was. He'd be running all over town trying to find anyone willing to work with him. And my name is all too well known here. Many would prefer not to even take on such a client if it meant facing me in court. And those who naively believed his stories would quickly wake up when they saw my trump cards. Carter liked to say that he'd make me beg him, but I knew perfectly well that it wouldn't be long before he himself would be standing on my doorstep, begging me to relent. And so it happened. One morning, while I was hurriedly getting ready for work, mentally noting that I was late again, someone knocked insistently on the door. At such an early hour, I expected anyone, a delivery man, a neighbor, but definitely not him. I opened the door and saw Carter, rumpled, haggard, with the expression of a man who hadn't slept for at least a couple of nights. I only let him in because I didn't want to make a scene in the middle of the street. I had enough of this drama without any extra witnesses. As soon as he crossed the threshold, I said, "Hurry up, Carter, I don't have a minute to spare. And anyway, we have a rule, only through lawyers." He pursed his lips. "Yeah, about that. I still haven't found a decent divorce lawyer." "What a tragedy, Carter. And please hurry, your mistress seems to be dying to try on a white dress. Doesn't she?" He waved his hand wearily. "I don't care about her anymore. Sophia, we need to talk. You're deliberately scamming my lawyers. It's not fair." I even burst out laughing. It sounded so absurd. He was always looking for someone to blame, just to avoid seeing his own role in this whole thing. His whole life he believed that money would make anyone dance to his tune. A lovely joke, Carter, but let's be clear. I didn't sabotage anything. You're setting yourself up. Remember how you lied to your lawyers about the affair and the contract? That was enough to make them look like idiots in court. And what self-respecting lawyer would allow that? Besides, yes, my name really does matter. You may think I'm a nobody, but I have an excellent reputation in our industry. He looked down. "Yes, I get it now, Sophia. I tried to be honest, but no one wants to work with me." Because you decided to contest a contract that's uncontestable. You should have thought through your gambles better, Carter. But it's too late now. The damage is irreparable. No reasonable lawyer would even touch your case. You'll still give me half your business. Carter's expression spoke volumes. He was clinging to his business with a death grip and had no intention of letting go. That's why he was so desperately searching for any kind of competent lawyer and trying to drag out the divorce. He wanted to keep me around long enough for me to snap, get tired of the constant fuss, and simply leave the whole thing without demanding my half of the company. After a few days, even he realized no one would defend him in court. He'd barely found a lawyer willing to even consider his case if he knew he'd have to face me. And then he resorted to his last, most pathetic option. He started crying and begging abjectly. "Sophia, you know how much this business means to me. Don't do this, please. Take whatever you want, just don't demand we split the company." "And why not, Carter? You were the one who wrote the clause about dividing the business in the event of infidelity. Do you really believe I'd voluntarily give up my rights after the blow you dealt me?" "I was wrong, Sophia. I realized everything. I put the relationship on hold. I realized how stupid I was. Maybe we can try again? I'm sure this test will only make us stronger." I laughed, loudly, sincerely, almost surprised. Carter's audacity amazed even me, though I thought I'd seen it all. He was seriously suggesting I get back together, as if I was so simple as to fall for it. Yes, I knew he'd temporarily suspended his relationship with his mistress. Rumors were already circulating around town. His mistress was furious. Carter was unhappy, both of them complaining to anyone who would listen. But if he thought this circus would touch me, he'd simply lost touch with reality. I'd already made the only mistake, married him, and paid dearly for it. Now I understood perfectly why he was suddenly drawn back. "You're probably delusional suggesting such a thing, Carter. I never got to this point in my life being a fool. You just need me to give up my share. You want me back not for us, but for the business." "Sophia, we were happy. Let's just erase this incident and try again. I'll break up with her for good, I swear." "Carter, there's no sense or logic to this. This woman will disappear as soon as she realizes you won't be so rich after the divorce. And for me, this is the perfect chance to escape a marriage that's only existed on paper for so long. Thank you, by the way, for showing your true colors before we had children. Now you'll reap what you've sown." I stopped there. He continued muttering, pleading, hanging on every word, as if he could convince me otherwise. But I had long since stopped feeling either pity or rage, only a cold satisfaction. The same satisfaction he forced me to suppress those nights when I quietly cried into my pillow while he was having fun with his mistress. Seeing him so weak and broken now wasn't sad. It was right. This was my moment of retribution. All that was left was to get a clean break and move on. And I got far more than I could have ever expected. Karma hit Carter quickly and mercilessly. He spent weeks trying to convince me to come home, begging me to come home, bombarding me with messages and calls. I ignored it all without a trace of interest. His drama was no longer a part of my life. I was already moving on. As soon as he filed for divorce, I entrusted my case to a lawyer from our firm. I hadn't handled divorce proceedings myself, and frankly, I didn't want to deal with him directly for a second longer than necessary. Month after month, he batted at closed doors until he finally realized he'd have to find a lawyer and ask for a clean divorce. If he decided to go to court, he'd only face humiliation and a mountain of useless court-appointed attorney fees. So he gave in and begged for a mutual agreement. The prenuptial agreement made everything surprisingly simple. I had enough evidence of his infidelity to leave no loopholes. According to the documents, he was obligated to transfer half of the business to me. He was seething with anger, but he had no choice. He signed. We even gave him a chance to buy out my share, but he didn't have the money. Why did this big businessman end up with empty pockets? He'd blew every last cent on his mistress, who now wouldn't answer his phone or reply to his messages. It seemed she'd finally realized he was no longer a good catch. And now, no one wanted anything to do with her, realizing she was a gold digger. Well, a natural outcome. But his mistress was just a small part of his disaster. Having lost half his business, he lost half his income. He had to sell his house. He simply couldn't afford the mortgage or the upkeep. Now he's living in a rented apartment, and it feels like a fall off a cliff for a man who once strolled around a huge mansion. Yes, he tried to get back with me. He dreamed of regaining complete control of the business. One thing is clear, that will never happen. Now he has only two options: continue operating as is, or somehow manage to save up enough money to buy me out. As for me, everything is going great. I appointed a manager for the portion of the business that was left to me, and he's doing a wonderful job. Combined with the income from my law practice, this has given me such financial freedom that I was able to buy a new house and improve my standard of living. Everything is going well, and I'm truly happy. The divorce was a blessing in disguise. Instead of becoming a victim of my husband and his mistress, I thwarted their plans and built my life better than ever.